On the screen is a bust of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II, first ruler of the Middle Kingdom. Similar to Narmer, Mentuhotep II played a significant role in the reunification plans formation of the state Kemet. This needed be done again due to the first intermediate period occurring where some leaders in Lower Kemet, most likely of Eurasian origin, went to war with the indigenous pharaonic leaders in Upper Kemet, the original Remechu. My reasoning for thinking the leaders of Lower Kemet were Eurasians is due to many reasons, such as in primary text called the Admonition of Ipwer. It was written during the Middle Kingdom, and it talks about a story where tribes of foreigners with pale faces flood into Lower Kemet from elsewhere, and were becoming Remechu aka Egyptians. This makes sense historically since it's known that the Middle East region didn't have land conducive for producing enough crops to feed all the people who settled there, which caused waves of back migrations back into Egypt and most of North Africa. The account from the Admonition of Ipwer could indeed be a reflection of what led up to the first intermediate period, and had foreign-born people fighting and killing indigenous Africans in order to take over. Mentuhotep II is the pharaoh to end all the chaos and disorder by reuniting the two lands under one ruler, with the throne in the south in Upper Kemet. His name meaning Mentu is satisfied. Mentu is the Neter aka god of war in ancient Kemet. Seeing that Mentuhotep is the pharaoh to end the war and chaos in Kemet, his name fits him perfectly. Kemet would eventually be subject to many other foreign invasions throughout its history. On the screen now is a photo of two brothers from the Roman era, showing obvious signs of racial admixture. In the ancient times, Kemet was a popular locale for human settlement and trade, which subsequently resulted in many foreign people seeking refuge in Kemet when resources outside of Africa were becoming scarce. The indigenous inhabitants of Kemet were subjected to invasion by groups such as the Hyksos, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Turks, French, British, and more. In 1920, a Muslim by the name of Fouad became king, and attempted to take Kemet out of Africa by trying to connect it to the Middle East and went on to rename the country the Arab Republic of Egypt, which it is still referred to as today. Disingenuous people like to make the claim that the ancient Egyptians' population was unaffected despite all the foreign invasions, which is false, seeing there's no record of these foreigners completely abandoning Kemet after their occupation of the land. It is more plausible that the indigenous population around Upper Kemet proceeded to move southward to escape incoming invasion, and the foreigners who already were settled in Lower Kemet picked sides and assimilated with the other foreigners coming in. The people who decided to stay in Lower Egypt where they previously migrated to were not the indigenous Africans who started the Egyptian culture, so they couldn't care less about Egyptian culture. They just needed fertile land to live. This is why many of the monuments in that area were completely forgotten about and were buried under the sand. Scavenging Europeans had to come in and rediscover Kemet's greatness. Indigenous Egyptians always migrated further south, like with Hyksos invasion, where the Egyptians set up base in the south in order to fight off the invading Amu, who had taken over Lower Kemet in the north. The Remechu were too generous, allowing foreigners to settle in their land, which eventually led to those foreigners taking control of the delta, where they were already becoming majority. The prejudiced scholars who wish to paint Kemet as a Middle Eastern country are privy to the history, which is why they purposely focus on excavating areas that were known settlements of foreigners, Lower Kemet. They publish studies that show non-Africans' genetic markers, which are used to make the disingenuous argument that Kemet was a non-African culture. However, not one study has been published discussing the genealogy of the inhabitants living in the Pharaonic region, where the culture initially started. Lower Kemet was inhabited second to Upper Kemet, so it would make the most sense for scholars to start focusing on the areas where the ruling class came from, instead of where foreigners were coming in at.